Hey everyone, I'm Nicole and I'm a UX designer in the design system team at Booking.com here in Amsterdam, where I've been for the last 4 years alongside with Oleksii.
Hi, and welcome. My name is Oleksii. I work with Nicole as a senior designer in the design system team. I also joined the company over 4 years ago.
This talk is a story about our journey to multi-platform design and development at Booking.com. We will share how we connected Figma with our source of truth in code, and we will show you our multi-platform development process in the design system team. Before we start talking about design systems, let's talk a bit about Booking.com, who we are, what we do, and about our team. At Booking.com, we believe that life is made of experiences. Experiences we share with each other, experiences both big and small. But sometimes life gets in the way and stops you from getting out there in the first place. That's why we're on a mission to make it easier for everyone to experience the world. Let's talk about booking and numbers. Booking.com is the #1 online travel platform in the world. It's used by millions of people, and we speak to our customers in 44 languages across the world in more than 220 countries. We are known for accommodations, but Booking.com is more than just accommodations. We also enable travelers to experience the world through flights, car rentals, taxis, as well as attractions. Such a big selection of products requires a big team. The tech department consists of more than 150 product teams. More than 200 product designers are working together to deliver a unified experience that's spread across 6 different platforms. That includes customer-facing and partner-facing across web and mobile apps. With such a scale, we have one design system that serves all of these teams and platforms. One design system to rule them all. In the design system team, our mission is to make it easier for designers and developers to do their best work. We provide guidelines, component libraries, technical documentation, services, tools, and education to enable product teams to design and build higher quality work more efficiently. As a design system team, we own and maintain the component library in Figma. In Figma, our library consists of 65 components that have more than 2,000 variants. We have more than 100 styles, so that's things like text, colors, shadows, etc., which Oleksii will demonstrate later. And these components and styles are used by around 200 teams. On average, our designers use around 50,000 inserts per week. Our team is structured in a way to support all the different technologies that our products serve. Other than the designers in the team, we have dedicated developers for each platform: iOS, Android, React, Vue, and internal tooling. Now that you have an idea on who we are and what we do, Oleksii will dig into our foundation setup and how we connected Figma with our source of truth in code.
Thank you, Nicole. As you've just seen, we have a lot going on at Booking.com. And operating at such a huge scale is no walk in the park. With hundreds of designers and developers, it is hard to achieve a cohesive multi-platform experience. Our product has evolved organically over time. It is the result of over 25 years of experimentation and taking risks. That evolution has been formalized by the design language team into a consistent vocabulary. We use it to identify our brand, to guide people through their journey and communicate in a way that's universally relatable, but distinctly Booking.com. It is the foundation for both our brand standards and our design system. In Figma, these foundations are represented mostly by color, typography, shadow, word radius, layout, icon, and illustration. These are building pieces that are here to inform and guide, a single source of truth to help everything they build feel part of the same family. Our design system has become a daily driver for many designers and developers. But as we started implementing design language, the design system faced a number of issues. Our goal was to fix them by making foundations themable, more scalable, remove duplicates, and improve product quality. Let's dive into details and see how we managed to fix them across all supported platforms. For all styles, we created functional tokens that communicate a specific context and are used across all platforms. For example, action background and border colors. Such a structure allows us to tweak values without any changes to code. So no breaking changes, enable theming, and built-in support for both light and dark modes. For color, shadow, and grid, the setup in Figma was quite straightforward. We created groups using slash in the name, for example, foreground, background, border, etc. We also added style description in case designers are not sure if it's the right styles and can check without searching for it in our documentation. We had the same setup for typography in Figma. But in code, typography tokens have built-in fluidity that changes properties based on breakpoints. This ensures they work seamlessly on different screens and platforms. Unfortunately, such functionality is not yet supported in Figma, but we added breakpoints to style names as it's important during the handoff process. Border radius was a bit less easy to set up. In Figma, currently there is no way to add a border radius as a reusable style. In our case, that was a deal breaker, as our themes have different border radii, and that prevented us from using a single component library. So we created a hack. We add a special suffix -- border. It's added to a layer that needs to have a border radius token. Then, in the component description, we specify which token value it should use, small, medium, or large. And because Figma's API is quite advanced, it also lets us control each corner individually through a CSS-like declaration. These are the foundations that are part of our Figma library. Colors, typography, shadows, and grid are shipped as reusable styles. Border radius is implemented as a hack on a component level. Maintaining such a library is not that hard, a little over 100 styles in total. But we also need to support dark mode. I will demo it in a sec. That's double the amount, so 200 plus styles in total. That's also okay, but not as easy as one library. And by the way, we ship all foundations in both themes and modes, as some teams prefer to design in dark mode and need access to all styles. Currently, we use 3 themes that support both modes, so that's 6 libraries with over 600 styles. We struggle maintaining them manually. We also plan adding even more themes as we want to work with other products, localization efforts, and partnerships. These could end up with tens of themes and thousands of styles. All of them should be perfectly synced all the time, otherwise theming won't work. And it's only in Figma. We also have iOS, Android, React, and Vue. Obviously, manual maintenance doesn't work. We need help. So we work closely with our developers to create one source of truth for all our themes, modes, and tokens. We called it the Design API. It safely stores foundational data, versions all changes, and can convert platform-agnostic values into platform-specific tokens for iOS, Android, Vue, React, and Figma. Yes, we do not create styles manually in Figma. We created a plugin that safely pulls all this data from our Design API. It saves us hours of manual work, prevents many bugs and visual inconsistencies. By the way, it pulls not only names and values, but also metadata such as style description and the right order. This plugin has also a version for all designers at Booking to work with themes. Dark mode works as a toggle on a theme level. Platform selection lets us support different system fonts, San Francisco Pro for iOS and Roboto for Android. And border radius hack is also themable. For people exploring theming, we recommend trying the Themer plugin by Thomas Lowry. If your setup doesn't have over limitations, it should work quite well. This structure allowed us to deprecate all 4 component libraries. and use only one library for all products and themes for all supported platforms. But hey, what about icons? They're also part of foundations, as I showed at the beginning. Icons had similar issues as other foundations. They were used differently across platforms. Multiple icon fonts, inline SVGs, PDFs, sprites, you name it, we had literally everything. And not just the format was different, but the style too. Our approach to solving this problem was similar to tokens. We worked with our developers to create one source of truth for all our assets. We called it the asset service. It stores all our icons in a single place, versions changes, and is used by all supported platforms, including Figma. And just like with styles, we built a plugin that pulls all icons from the asset service to Figma. We use it to create the library, but also to fetch recent changes. Figma API allowed us not only to pull SVGs, but also assign a default color, size, and even description with metadata for search keywords. We're also scaling these tools and processes for other types of assets, like illustrations. We store all of them in our source of truth, the asset service. It is used by all platforms and allows us to seamlessly keep assets in sync. One source of truth for all assets and for all styles and assets enables us to achieve a cohesive multi-platform experience. And we believe that the code-first approach brought designers and developers closer to making product innovation much easier. So what are the key takeaways? Rather than using generic names, create contextual styles. Simple check. Is it clear where the style is used in my product? Automate maintenance for your styles and assets. Remember, Figma API is your friend. Try building Figma plugins. It is fun and immensely useful. Use the description section in components to educate your users, but also to include keywords to improve the search results. Body radius style is missing, but if you need it, there are ways to hack it. And lastly, create one source of truth for your foundations that will unite developers and designers. And now, Nicole will share our multi-platform development process. She will go step by step and show how we use this setup in our workstream. So Nicole, take it away.
Since our design system is multi-platform, in order to keep it cross-platform aligned, any change we make has to go through this multi-platform development process. In order to have unity between design and development, the key is to create a process where designers and developers are working together in parallel. It's easy for designers and developers to disconnect and work in silo, as the area of focus is quite different. The key is to bridge that gap in order to create cross-platform alignment and design development unity. I'd say it's up to the designer to drive this. So we created this process to use for feature development in the design system team. Whenever we start working on a feature, whether that's a new component, an update, or a reassessment of a component, we follow this defined process. I will go through each step in detail. The first half of the process is all about assessment. The design is done by the designers, where we audit the current state, design the proposal, and gather feedback. The handoff is where we present the design proposal to the developers. The tech assessment is done by the developers to discuss technical implementation and component properties. And the kickoff happens with everyone, where we review what was discussed and commit to the decisions before implementing. Most of the times, the changes we make comes as a request from the design community. The first step in the design part is to assess the request that we are required to make. So this is where we ask, what is the problem it solves? How many teams have requested it? What are the requirements? We recommend product designers to fill in a proposal template to get all the requirements needed. In this example, the change is to add a new variant for the check button component, a dismissible variant. That makes the component get dismissed after pressing it. After defining the changes that we will do, we audit the current state of the component on the different platforms. And we highlight if this change is already there on platforms and any other misalignments that we see. We work with the developers to understand better how the component is currently implemented on the different platforms. In this case, dismissible is supported on Android already, as it was a request that was made a while ago and was not aligned with other platforms. It was before we introduced this multi-platform process. We also see another misalignment during the audit. The icon is supported on web only, so we usually park this and create a separate ticket for it. Next, in the design assessment, we prepare the change required as a proposal. We define all the specifications, the anatomy, the variants that the change will impact, as well as behaviors of the change when it's relevant. In this case, we introduced a new behavior where on tap on the dismissible check button, it gets removed rather than unchecked. We work with the community to get feedback on the changes that we're making, and we share our design proposal with the stakeholders. It's also worth noting that we have a dedicated accessibility team that we share our proposals with and review the accessibility requirements of the component, such as contrast ratios and ARIA labels for assistive technologies. We also share it in the different design channels, and we gather feedback and use cases from the designers. Then we iterate accordingly. When we hand off the design to the developers, we share the design proposals with them beforehand to gather feedback on the Figma file. Then we meet and we discuss the anatomy and specs of the component change, and we see examples of the component as well as edge cases that are worth discussing. After the developers have everything they need, the developers lead the tech assessment. Together, we all discuss and get consensus on states and behaviors of the component, depending on capabilities of every platform. This is where we resolve ambiguities or edge cases that were not finalized in the design handover due to further investigation needed by developers. Sometimes we have to go back in a cycle to reiterate based on the technical requirements, but we try to do iterational changes. We do it right, but it can always change based on the other requirements. During this assessment, one of the developers gets assigned to the component properties. Just like we store the foundation tokens in our API, as Oleksii demonstrated, we also store component properties in our design API. A component property is an attribute that represents a component feature that can be configured by product teams. In this case, the input check buttons properties are listed here. That's text, selected, disabled, and an optional icon. What's nice about component properties is that they are platform agnostic, meaning that components can look different on different platforms, but share the same properties. In this case, the check button looks the same on all platforms. But in other cases, like this native dialog component, the dialog looks quite different between iOS and Android, but they share the same exact properties in code: title, text, primary action, and secondary action. This is what makes properties so powerful. It's the one source of truth for every component, and it's the key to cross-platform alignment. Back to our check button component, the assigned developer creates a merge request of the properties with suggested changes. We discuss them and explore other options of the change during this assessment. In this case, we added a dismissible state under a new state property, and we removed the selected Boolean property. This sometimes results in a breaking change of which we announce to the developer community on our channels. Next, we do a kickoff meeting to start the implementation. During kickoff, we review the designs, the updated specs, the technical requirements, as well as the properties. We then commit to the changes and we merge the properties request. Then we set the timelines for implementation and the estimated release dates. We try to do the implementation in parallel as much as possible to keep the components aligned across platforms. In the second half of the process, we implement and release the changes. We do the implementation across all platforms as well as in the Figma library. We also update and define guidelines for the new change that we made. The developers execute the changes according to the specs, the properties, and the technical requirements that we've defined. We have our own internal platform to store the components as well as the configurable properties. It has a playground where you can play around with the component and test the behavior and configurable features. During implementation, the developers also update the documentation for the component with the changes that we made. We write documentation about every component, such as the composition, best practices, accessibility requirements, and the explanation for each property. Meanwhile, the designers create a branch in the main design system library, and we make the changes in the branch. Every component in our design system is made out of different variants that are configured through properties. This is where we sync the Figma properties with the new properties that we defined earlier in the process. The designers also review the design guidelines of the component. Every component is documented in our internal design documentation, where we show the configurable properties, the behavior, as well as do's and don'ts for designers. We also cross-link to the different platform documentation so that we keep things connected between design and development. This is where we review the guidelines and make adjustments based on the change we made. After the implementation is done, we do a design review to compare the implementation with design. We have catalog apps for every platform to test the implementation of every component in our library. We go through the different properties, the specs, and the behavior across all platforms and iterate accordingly. Once it's ready, a new library version is published on each platform. We release a full changelog in the different channels for every platform. In Figma, we do regular weekly releases of the component library on Fridays to better manage the updates. We create a changelog which we share in our design channels, and we store it in our changelog page, part of our design documentation. When a breaking change in the Figma component is expected, we highlight it in the changelog for better predictability. And for better visibility on the changes we make, we publish a monthly announcement in the design system channel where we list all the changes we did that month on a higher level context. So this was the multi-platform development process that we use in our design system team. This was a process that we built over time that works for our team. We documented this process along with this checklist as a resource in the Figma community. Check it out on this link or scan the QR code. You will find a checklist of every step of the process that I went through to use it in your team. So here are some key takeaways for multi-platform development. Define a process that works for your team. Sit together with developers and define how your work stream looks like, and possibly assign individuals to lead each stream. Involve developers early on in the process to keep the conversation open about technical limitations and talk about all platforms from the start. Define thorough specs to avoid misalignments. As designers, we're responsible to define these specs in detail and hold each other accountable when misalignments are caught. Sync your Figma properties and variants with properties that you define with developers for every component. And last but not least, document your components with guidelines and do's and don'ts, and cross-link design documentation with technical documentation.
We hope you could relate to these topics. We'd like to encourage you to challenge your team with a few questions. Which kind of source of truth would work for your team? Do you need to automate style and asset management in Figma? How do you currently design and develop a multi-platform experience? And how can you improve that process? So with that, we thank you for being here with us today. We really enjoyed sharing these learnings, and we wish you good luck in your design system initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you.